we're in the last and most exciting panel. They even got my papers. I don't even have my papers anymore. So this is called the fun facts of Winston Churchill. Curiosities and what Churchill never said. So who starts? Adam.
Okay.
What people say Churchill said that he never said?
So I've worked very hard to purge from my brain the things that he didn't actually say so that I didn't make the mistake of repeating it. But there is one famous quote that people love to refer to where Churchill said, "I'm a simple man. I have only the highest class of taste." I didn't even quote it correctly, but it's the right idea. He never actually said that. That was actually, most believe, a friend of his said that about him, but it's quoted often. But if you want, I'll go into one of the interesting aspects of Churchill that I haven't talked about. So one thing I've written about, actually, when it comes to Churchill is his willingness to push himself to the edge when it comes to adventures in life. And I have one example in particular that stands out, because Winston Churchill nearly lost his life many times. For example, in 1931, he was run over by a truck in New York City while he was looking for an apartment building. He also had been in other situations where he had some, again, near-death situations. But one in particular struck me when he was young, when he was a teenager. He was playing the game of tag, which I assume people in Brazil also play, where you touch the person.
Pega-pega. Now.
Okay. And he was playing this with family. And at one point, because it was so important for him to win, and he did not want to be tagged, he jumped off this precipice down a major drop and ultimately broke his back. He didn't realize it at the time, but he would find out later. That's the kind of personality he had, that he was willing, in order to win a game, and he was not a little child, he was a teenager, so he knew what he was doing, and he still decided he would jump off and risk death, at least major bodily harm, because he wanted to win. And I think that really speaks to that mentality. I think it speaks a lot to understanding why I always call him the first rock star, because he had that same sort of mentality of a rock star, always pushing the envelope, also being a great artist. Many people are familiar with what he wrote. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953, but he also painted over 500 paintings. And he started when he was initially in his 40s, became a great painter. And so that's something a lot of people don't realize about him. In fact, if you get to London this summer, there is a major collection, the largest collection of his paintings since his death, at the Wallace Collection in London. So I encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to see that. So I think, again, one of the things not well known about him, a love of art, not just literature, but also painting. And then in addition to that, this soul that would always push the boundaries as hard as he possibly could, including to the point of risking his physical safety.
Ricardo, you are...
I do love in Portuguese.
No.
In Portuguese.
No, in English, so Adam can...
In English,
Yeah.
all right, of course.
Our audience all speak English.
I'll do my best. So, there are so many fun facts and so many fun quotes. I honestly love the way Churchill liked to offend people in a classy way. So he said about Clement, I think it was Clement Attlee, he said, he's a sheep in a sheep's
dressing.
Ele é uma ovelha em pele de ovelha. Absolutamente inofensivo. So he loved it. Someone said, well, I wrote it down. Well, this guy's very humble, he said, of course, and he has a lot to be humble about. Ele é humilde, ele tem razão para ser humilde. Não tem virtudes. And this wit, this intelligence that he had, made him a powerful adversary. But people were actually afraid of having Churchill saying something like this because it sticks. People will remember forever. So I know when you're in politics and someone says something very clever about you, damn, people are going to remember me because of that. So Churchill was very, it's not like Trump. Trump is quite rude when he wants to offend somebody. He says, this woman is ugly. That's not intelligent. But no, Churchill was great about offending people. And sometimes, like here, he was talking about Ramsay MacDonald. He said, we know that he has, more than any other man, the gift of compressing the largest number of words into the smallest amount of thought. So, muitas palavras em poucos pensamentos. So I think this is one of the things that makes a great politician. His capacity of being, representing a reputation, risk to anybody who was debating with him. A sentence like this ends a debate and it's over, and you will be remembered because of the way Churchill mocked your intelligence. So also in the middle of a debate, someone from the back bench, you know, in the British Parliament, the most important members of Parliament sit in the front of the bench, and in the back are new members of Parliament, people who are not that important to the party. And someone started talking from behind, and they said, pointed to the people who were sitting in front and said, when the egos are silent, the parrots start to talk. So the lack of leadership from the party gives room to whoever is this guy. So he was quite smart about offending people. That's something I love about him.
There's one that I like. There was an MP talking and talking and talking, and he tried to interrupt this guy, and he didn't stop talking. And then Churchill eventually said, my dear colleague, please keep talking. You have to practice. And there's this one that he says, there are some members of this house, when they stand up, they don't know what they're going to say. When they are talking, they don't know what they are saying. And when they sit down, they don't know what they have said. So this is harsh. Beautiful, but harsh.
Even when he wanted to say something good and throw something there, like, the Americans will always do the right thing after exhausting all alternatives.
So I give back the floor to Adam. You have to get an insult from a Brazilian. So
But that's why we appreciated Churchill, because there was always a charm, even when he was insulting someone. And there was a certain arrogance that was still charming. For example, he said, history will be kind to me because I'm going to write it. And it's true, he did. He wrote volumes and volumes of memoir literature on his own career. He got to set the record the way Stalin and President Roosevelt did not. So it was a very true quote. But that's what was so great with Churchill. He could say things that were to the point, accurate, but at the same time demonstrated a wit that many people found disarming.
Today I'm going to do a long speech, because I didn't have the time to make a short one. So, Ricardo.
That's great, and I've done that many times.
Long speeches.
Long speeches, because it takes some time to say what you want to say in a short way. The same happens with letters. Long letters are faster to write than short letters. But he said, and I love the way he was skeptic and cynical about everything. Like, I like pigs. Cats look down to us. Dogs look up to us. Pigs treat us as equals.
So I found the right word here. I can well understand the noble colleague's desire to continue talking. Your Excellency needs a lot of practice. That's harsh.
I mean, one of the most famous ones was again, this is one that may have not actually happened, but everybody quotes it, where he had been told by a female member of Parliament, Mr. Churchill, if I were your wife, I would poison your tea, to which Mr. Churchill supposedly said, Madam, if you were my wife, I would drink it.
He never said that. He never said that.
But we all wish he did.
There is
That's so good.
There is a story that Bernard Shaw sent him some tickets, 2 tickets, to opening of Pygmalion at the theater, and sends a telegram, says, here follow 2 tickets, opening Pygmalion, bring a friend if you have. So Churchill writes him back and said, cannot go, we'll go to second night, if there is one. And then in the book I said, no, I told the story, and this story was never confirmed because a journalist heard that and called Churchill's office and couldn't talk to him. And one of his aides said, yes, well, it might be true. I mean, he had a contact with Bernard Shaw. And then he contacts Bernard Shaw, and Bernard Shaw said, no, never. That never happened. And if you publish anything, I will sue you. So it might be true. It might well be true.
There's another one related to Americans that, again, he did not say, but I think is very indicative of what he probably would have said if he had the chance. Just after World War I, supposedly, his personal secretary had said to him, Mr. Churchill, we need to be appreciative of the Americans. We should kiss them on both cheeks. To which Mr. Churchill said, certainly, but let's not kiss them on all 4 cheeks. And that was a good way for him to reference something that was more on the naughty side of his humor. And if that didn't translate, please do it in Portuguese.
Oh, you got it, right? You got it. Okay.
And one more that I like about Stanley Baldwin, he says, well, in those days, he was wiser than he is now. He used to take my advice. And also, I hate nobody except Hitler. But that is just professional. So in my personal life, I love everyone. But I also like the way he to say things about politics and to express sometimes complex ideas. He used language in a way that made it more interesting. Like, well, you're changing parties. He left the Conservative Party for the Liberal Party, and there was, at the time, it was not as, well, in England it's still not as common as it is here. And he said, well, some people, let me quote from him, some men change their party for the sake of their principles. Some men change their principles for the sake of their party.
That's a great one. I'm going to ask you, Adam, one thing. He wrote all his speeches, and he spent a lot of time writing them. And all this is, it's like the 800 speeches and all that. But, so he didn't improvise. Like normally politicians like to improvise. They ask, oh, what is the audience? And then they speak whatever you want to hear. So he wasn't like that. But in his deals at Parliament, he had this wit that, I mean, he didn't think twice besides saying all those things. So how he administrates this? Because he was very firm on his speeches and very loose on his day-by-day communication.
Yeah, I think on the speeches, part of his mastering of communication was recognizing that when you improvise on speeches, you risk flubbing your lines, messing up your lines. You also risk going on too long. And for him, language was very important in keeping it simple, making it understandable to the largest part of the population as he could. And so as a result, I think he was less likely to improvise in that situation in front of large audiences or on the radio. However, to your point, because he had the sharp wit, when he was in a social situation, he could use it there. Or one of the things you're rewarded for in Parliament is having a sharp wit. That's one of the ways you elevate your reputation. So it's encouraged in that environment. And I think it's something he probably worked on. I think some people are born with a quick wit. but you still have to develop it, and it's something that I think he spent a lot of time on because he knew how important it was for his career to have that kind of wit, especially when it came to those debates in Parliament.
We tend to idealize and make people who are important to us, we love to think that they're perfect, that they are nice people, good to talk to, and they have no flaws. And that's rarely true. It's also said that he was quite rude to the people, to some of the people who worked with him. He was not a very patient man. He liked to dictate from the bathtub and had a secretary sitting in front of the bathroom typing whatever he was dictating. And and of course, you can only imagine the amount of stress he was under during the war years. And he would still have to stop and correct someone who mistyped something that he was dictating. And when you were in situations like that, of course, you're not a perfect man, a perfect gentleman all the time. He had flaws. He had his own contradictions. And we sometimes try to find a perfect Churchill, and there's no such thing. Sometimes if you look closely, you'll find contradictions, things that he wouldn't have done, things that if you read it today, you say, well, he was not as good a conservative as he should have been, or as good a libertarian as he should have been. Oh, he raised taxes. He spent so much on that. But that's what life is. That's what our heroes are, and they're not perfect. So I would like to hear also from Adam some of his flaws.
No, I agree. But to me, what makes any historical figure interesting are the flaws, and do they learn from the mistakes they make? I'm always surprised when people want to hear about a perfect historical figure who passes every test, whether it be a political test or some other test of who they should be, as opposed to the reality of life, which is people make mistakes, and the true test is, do they learn from the mistakes? And then can they be someone we learn lessons from? Because if they make all the right calls, there's nothing to learn. No one can emulate that. And I think that's part of why Churchill has been so appealing to multiple generations and outside of Great Britain, because people know about mistakes that he made. People know the flaws, both personal as well as political. And the fact that he recognized those mistakes, and it would humble him at times, even though there was plenty of arrogance, I think wouldn't be completely inappropriate to say at times. But he knew that, he recognized that, but he was a man on a mission. He did not think he was going to live long. He ended up living to 90. Who would know with all the cigars and the alcohol and the food consumption? But he had, as mentioned, a lot of pressure when it came to World War II. And at the same time, he also believed he had much he wanted to accomplish. He was a man of ambition. And when you have that ambition, you're going to rub some people the wrong way. But in the end, I think what makes him so compelling is the fact that he learned lessons from those mistakes, and he was doing the right thing at the right time. Because although everyone makes mistakes, when did it matter most? And in May 1940, it mattered most. He was there. He made the right decisions. And so as a result, we recognize him today as someone who we want to emulate.
Yeah, we're talking about flaws. I was remembering, well, he did drink a lot. Like today, it would be unacceptable for a leader to drink as much as he did. Like,
With a small parenthesis, his whiskey drinking was with a lot of soda on it. So their secretary would say that tasted like mouthwash. And the champagne that he drank in the mornings or during the day, the bottles of champagne at that time were not the bottles of champagne that we have here. They are big ones. There were smaller bottles, so it was not that bad.
so when you read, well, he drank a bottle of champagne in breakfast. That's not a big bottle of champagne. It's just a small bottle of champagne.
And then there is thing. If you drink many hours, it doesn't mean that you drink a lot.
Exactly. I don't have a problem with that, but
You just drank so many hours.
once again, it would be unacceptable for today's terms to have a president having any champagne during breakfast, or at least for people to know that he did.
Cachaça, tudo bem.
Cachaça is fine, and in some cases it's advisable. But one thing that I love is that he did visit Roosevelt in the United States during the Prohibition. So
That's a nice one.
So when he did it, he had a doctor's note, atestado médico, saying that he was ordered to have alcohol during lunch and
the afternoon and
at night because of his health problems, so that he could drink while in the United States.
Well, I would even say that even in his own time, this caused problems, because Eleanor Roosevelt, when Churchill came to visit right after Pearl Harbor in December 1941, he came to the White House and he stayed for several weeks. And he would keep President Roosevelt up drinking late into the night. And President Roosevelt did not have the same constitution when it came to drinking alcohol that Winston Churchill had. And he had other responsibilities as president to do the next day. So she did not appreciate the late nights of drinking. Even back then, it was criticized and caused problems. But ultimately, it was part of the bond that both President Roosevelt and Winston Churchill developed during that pivotal moment between December 1941 and January 1942.
And he was such a picky guest. I mean, he had so many demands that when he finally left, Eleanor Roosevelt asked the government, and they built Blair House outside the White House, so the guests would be outside the White House because of Churchill.
There was also an assistant at the White House who had a bungalow, a home in South Florida near Miami. And apparently Eleanor Roosevelt was quite pleased when this was offered to Churchill during his long stay in the winter of 1941. So he took a few days and went to South Florida, much to the relief of Eleanor Roosevelt.
And there is this moment that Churchill and Roosevelt are talking. Well, they say that was not true also, but let's see. So they were both talking, and then Roosevelt gets out and Churchill goes to take a bath. And then Roosevelt, remember, he had to say something, and comes back. And when he comes back, he finds Churchill fully naked. And Roosevelt says, oh, I'm sorry, Churchill. And he says, Mr. President, the Prime Minister of His Majesty's government has nothing to hide from the President of the United States. But some people say that was not true. So
I'd like to think there's a kernel of truth somewhere in there.
But he did say when asked about how was meeting Roosevelt like, he said it's like opening your first bottle of champagne. That's whatever he meant about it.
Okay, my friends, your final. I mean, we could be here.
There's so much.
But we want you to go and listen to Paulo Guedes. So and find a place to find Paulo Guedes. So your final thoughts, my friends.
Well, once again, so much to say. I think his humor is fantastic. And to think that someone with those responsibilities, someone who suffered what he suffered in life, and politically he was attacked by his friends and his foes, and that he managed to keep good humor and to face all this with wit and in a fun way. It tells about why he was, after all, able to win this long-term battle, to overlast all his friends, and no one remembers Clement Attlee, if not for his battles with Churchill. No one cares about.
See, you can't even remember.
Yeah, see,
that's
my point.
That's your point.
So let's forget about those guys, except for Winston Churchill.
Adam.
Yeah, my final thought is, I worry that people find out how witty he was, how great a speaker he was, and they think, well, that's wonderful, but I can't be that. But I want to stress that Churchill really worked hard. This was not all natural gifts. He was someone who looked for mentors. One of them was actually an Irish-American congressman from New York who was a friend of Churchill's mother, and he visited him when he was 21. Burke Cochran was his name. and he emulated him and learned from him. And a lot of the great speeches we've referenced, he was taking from people who influenced him. So, for example, the famous speech where he says, "We shall fight in the streets, we will fight on the landing grounds, shall never surrender." He took a lot of that from George Clemenceau, who had been the leader of France during World War I, who said something very similar about, in France, we will fight in the streets of Paris, we will fight by the Arc de Triomphe, we will never surrender. And that's what the best artists and writers do. They take from their mentors, they take from the best. So before you think, I can't be Churchill, he's amazing and it's wonderful, but I can't emulate that, don't be so sure, because a lot of work was put into it, and he looked for a lot of influences that he drew from. And so I would take that as something that can be very helpful, especially for young people.
Ricardo, Anand.
That was just one last thing, and ending in a serious tone. Pedro Ruchurtu was here. He was one of the Venezuelans who was arrested in the Argentinian embassy for more than a year. And when I saw him, I thought, well, all those things that Churchill fought for, all those principles that he defended, are still in need for our work. So it's so good that we have someone to look after and to look up to, and to, if we can, in our sphere of influence, do at least what Churchill would have done.
Thank you very much. Never give in, never surrender. Thank you very much.